So basically we were doing a redesign or a retrofit of what I originally had. And then once I mocked up the retrofit redesign, now we're redesigning the retrofitted redesign, if that makes any sense.
Hey guys, Anthony Jones with the Top Gun Jumbo, and this is video 3 of the rear deck rebuild. Thanks for your patience on this project. Can't wait to show you the final result. We've got to get through the build first, so let's get to it. And don't forget, join the movement and subscribe to the channel.
Basically, if I bump my framing back and I put my latch on this side for it to flip, the hatch is going to hit those motor supports. Pick your poison. Do you want the outboard on and you're out on the water and you can't open the hatch? Or do you want the outboard on and you're out on the water and you can open the hatch this way 3/4 of the way before it hits the motor bracket? If I need more clearance in my framing to accommodate a 15.5-inch massive Godzilla battery, I mean, that's what I got to do. Let me just tell you something. I had to chisel that block off and smash it to pieces even after taking the screws out, because I glued it with Titebond 2. I glue all my framing joints with Titebond 2. Man, that stuff has so much bite that after I removed all the screws, I couldn't get that block off. You can see how well that glued and set up. So if you're doing wood framing in your Jumbo, I highly recommend some Titebond 2. Okay, back to square one. I've never spent so much time just framing out a box. That's essentially what this is. I'm just taking a step back and trying to make sure that this thing fits. This is my battery mock-up. It's going to go in and it's going to slide down. That's kind of what it's going to do. Only problem is, you can see it's kind of getting hung up on my Livewell pump. When I get the E80 battery, the E80 is the middle size one, which that's what this is mocked up for. When I get that battery, then I'll relocate the pump. I'll deal with that later down the road, because that's going to require me to patch a hole in the boat. I'm thinking what I can do is slide this battery like all the way over. I could put my pump over down in here in this corner and then run my hose back around and through, and we'll be all good in the hood. I really can't believe I didn't have those measurements or check. I had the measurements. I really can't believe I didn't check those measurements and verify before I framed all this the way I was going to do it. On a positive note, guys, I'm glad that I caught it before I got any further. Sometimes you got to change your game plan, just go with the flow, and practice a little acceptance. I have removed the ledger. I cut all this ledger out to make room for that battery to go underneath this framing. Went ahead and cut this out. I kind of hacked it up, but I'll clean this up to go ahead and remove my Livewell fill plumbing. I cut this as a piece for mock-up that's just ripped on a 19 degree, because here's what happens, guys. This is going to be that new battery. I built it to the exact dimensions that ePropulsion sent me. So what we're trying to do is just make sure that this is going to be able to slide down in. I ripped it on an angle to give my hatch more material to land on, and it's going to be a tight fit. And then the battery will just pull out. My hatch lid's actually going to flip up this way. Use this as an example. My hatch will sit like this, and it'll flip up. And when the motor's on, that's as far as it'll go. This is how it was beforehand. I was going to change that design and have it flip up this way, but I'm not going to do that now, because my hatch would have to land right about in here, and it's going to hit my motor brackets. We're just going to go back with this, and that way when I'm out in the boat, I could actually, if I'm on the water, I could get in there and access things. As you guys can tell at this point, I have no idea what I'm doing. My plans change every day, but I do know I need to go ahead and cut my Livewell access bigger. It's nice to go back and be able to do these things since I'm already back here. I think we go ahead and cut our Livewell access a big hole, go ahead and remove some foam, give myself plenty of room to work. Wherever that access is going to change how my angled aluminum runs. So yeah, one thing leads to another, as you guys can tell. Okay, I got my access cut, got some of the foam removed. You can see the spray nozzle connection right here, and I'm going to build an access panel that covers this and screws into place. It'll obviously have a hole cut for this hose to feed through. Okay, I've got this area back here prepped for paint. It's been sanded. Went ahead and took the grinder to the holes that were blowouts from where the framing was originally attached. I'm going to go ahead and paint this back wall this nice gloss gray before I go ahead and mount my angled aluminum on to support my framing structure. That back there is going to be a finished product. I'll probably eventually paint this floor as well and do this back end of this transom, but for now we're going to go ahead and do that because I need to move forward. Went ahead and tied this in on both sides. I took a variety of drill bits for me to countersink these 1.5" stainless sheet metal screws, tying that into that rear bench, and so now this is structurally sound. I've got this other piece of framing installed, and so this part is pretty much redesigned and all glued and screwed back together. Go ahead and take some Bondo all-purpose putty, fill in some screw holes, fill in some of these joints and knots. Really, I'm just using it to skim over some of the imperfections to give it a nice smooth look, so when it's all painted, it looks like that. All right, the all-purpose putty is a 2-part system, so it comes with hardener. You mix this with the hardener, and then you just spread it out over any of the imperfections. Sand first, then spread it on. When it hardens, sand smooth, and then you'll have a nice smooth finish. I like to strategically paint my parts off the boat, so for these dividers, I'm going to do the bottoms and the sides. So if I don't paint them now and I go ahead and mount them, I won't be able to get to them. And if I don't get to them, then if water gets to them when they're in the boat, then it's going to delaminate and start causing me a lot of issues. I'm just doing about 3 coats using a zippy roller. So as far as the boat, I've done this back panel. I went ahead and did this underside of this transom. Oh, and I did the sides over here, just where that wood's going to make contact. This side as well. I'll do all the middle stuff later down the road when all the framing is in and I do my final paint. Using the old gloss smoke gray oil-based enamel. Again, guys, I use like 3 coats minimum because some of this wood grain will soak it up like a sponge. Just in case any water gets in there, it'll just bead off of it and the wood won't absorb it, and then you won't have any rot issues later on the road. I know I'm bouncing all over the place right now in between Bondo work and paint and this and that and the other, but got the framing back in. I need to go ahead and put these little spacers in that I ripped. They're going to kind of go down in here. Here, what I decided is I'm going to leave a notch for my bilge pump hose to go down into. I'm going to have to notch around that original transom bracket down there. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and try to get this installed. I like my fitments tight, and that little piece came out pretty tight. Show you. Now just screw it and glue it, and then I'll repeat on this side. Got the other piece cut, the fitment. Fitment is very tight. Again, using that Titebond 2 wood glue. I'm going with 1.25" trim head screws, screwing it in from the back side, and then everything's going to be compacted back this way with screws back into the transom. Okay, so we know that this framing is sitting on a ledger up here. We know that this framing is supported by this plywood on the sides. To give it more support on this back end, I'm going to take some angled aluminum and I'm going to run it underneath here as a ledger. Take some of that angled aluminum and I'm going to screw it into this wooden transom here. Over here, I'm going to take some angled aluminum pieces and rivet it to this side. Well, that was pretty freaking scary. Okay, got that mounted. I was able to use screws into this because that's wood. This is just the aluminum transom. So I got my bracket, holes pre-drilled with 1/8. Gonna be using 1/8 by 1/4 rivets. Got a 1/4 inch grip range, diameter of 1/8. And then I've got my rivet gun. This is 1 inch angled aluminum by 1/16. I'm using this as a ledger. You could attach it via rivets or even screws. My framing goes in and they actually sit on top of these. This is something new that I'm doing on this rear end. Previously, as you can see the screw holes, I just attached the wood directly to the transom. Now how I'm doing it is I'm cutting it on an angle. I'm attaching it to the transom and I'm also supporting it with angled aluminum ledgers. I dropped the framing back in, so let me show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, the aluminum, the angled aluminum, makes contact with the wood and it just supports it in place. I definitely feel like that aluminum beefs up this framing package in the rear end and ultimately will provide a long-lasting result. On this back section, since I cut out that middle portion of the framing to make room for the battery to drop in and slide under, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to run this 1.5 by 1.5 angled aluminum back here as a ledger. Whew. I'm about to pop this framing back out and sand some of these Bondo spots and sand the underside. Basically, I'm going to paint all the spots that I'm not going to be able to get to once it's mounted in the boat. If you do your framing and stick it in the boat and then paint just what you can see, you're not painting all of it. Therefore, it's not all getting sealed. And here you can see that 1.5 by 1.5 angled aluminum. Got it all sanded out. I used my DeWalt palm sander with 180. What you'll notice is this is one thing I like to do. It's kind of a signature thing of mine. And it's to fill in all the knots and imperfections with Bondo. And then also the screw holes. When it's all said and done and painted, it gives you this effect where everything looks like it's molded in. This is over a year old. No stress cracks. I mean, it's all good in the hood. So this stuff holds up really, really well if properly done. I mean, you've got to do the glue, the screws, the proper construction, proper supports, and then obviously the proper prep before doing the Bondo and then before doing the paint. Doing a little bit of paint work on the panels before I get them into place. Using that gloss smoke gray Rust-Oleum. I like to use these foam rollers. These are the foam rollers. They achieve a nice smooth finish. There's the paint again. Got a coat on the bottom side of the framing and then actually like on the back side where it'll be mounted to the transom. On my hatch dividers, I went ahead and mounted that C-channel aluminum, 1/2 inch stainless screws. So now what I'm going to do is make a mark on the inside, drill some pilot holes and start attaching these panels to the box. This top line is where I traced where this lines up with this box. Okay, this bottom line is the measurement of what this wood is on the bottom of that box. Okay, now I don't have to try to drill holes and line things up. I know exactly where I got to drill my holes, so I'm going to drill a couple pilot holes, probably 4 or 5. Go ahead and drill them. Then I could drop that in, glue it, and then screw it from the backside, and I know I'll hit wood. I'm gluing the edges up, so I'm going to use the tight bond just to kind of get it into place. You use these trim head screws. This is a great example of a time to use this screw. But these screws are very, very effective. As long as you drill pilot holes and drill them in straight, I'm going to show you how I do it. There it is. You can see pilot holes, screws go through. I'm just going to tell you that was a total pain. No blowouts. These are, I believe, 1.25 inches. But man, I wish I had these in like 3/4 or 1 inch. I can move on to doing this other side, then dropping the framing and start attaching it. Coming back in with that tight bond, filling up the seams. Got both dividers in. I went ahead and sanded what's left of this bracket. Nice and smooth. In other news, got a new bilge pump hose from Athens Marine. Thanks, guys. I'm going to relocate the bilge pump, move it over, and then the hose is going to have to run different way. So got some more hose. We'll deal with that later. I'm having to use my little work drill as my impact. I can't get it in here. I can't get the right angle. It's always nice to have this little guy around. It comes in real handy, especially in real tight spaces where you need to drive a screw straight. Got a couple big cracks I'm going to fill. I'm going to use the Bondo glass for some of the bigger stuff. This is a fiberglass strand reinforced Bondo. And then I'm going to use the Bondo all-purpose putty to cover the screw holes. When I talk about screw holes, I'm talking about like these. I'll cover this knot. And when I'm talking about bigger cracks, we're talking about here. And I'll sand it, paint it. It'll look good as new, like nothing had ever been done. That's the goal. This stuff stinks. You might breathe in the fumes. You might want to open a garage door, ventilate the area, something like that. Woo! Hey man, we gotta open this garage up. I can't handle it. Bondo glass, a little bit Bondo putty. All right, framing package is in. I am standing on this. Guys, I weigh just under 180. Obviously, you can see no squeaking, no issues at all. Putting all my body weight on the framing, and you can see we are good, cousins. I actually went ahead and recessed some stainless sheet metal screws. Some of these, connected them to that original bench. And I went ahead and tied in that aluminum to the framing, as you can see. It's tied in up, it's tied in back. This is tied into the transom. Same deal back here. So that's where you get all your structural support. From these on the side, these uprights that are locked in. Now, I could talk about this framing package all day. It looks simple, and when people see it, they just think, oh, it's 4 boards, no big deal. But really, it's a lot more complex than what it looks. Okay, Bondo and everything kind of cured overnight, so we're going to get to sanding. I'm going to use my DeWalt sander. It's 120 grit. Sand down all these spots and just kind of smooth it all out. I'll probably have to sand and then reapply a skim coat in some spots and sand again and so on and so forth until I get it how I want it and get it paint ready. Mail call. Just got an order in from Jason at Tiny Boat Nation Shirts and Decals. He's got me all my new decals for the 2020 season for the boat. I can get them out of here. PT5 Fishing, all my sponsors, ePropulsion. Jason made some hats. Get that. Top Gun John Boats, cousins. Anyhow, super pumped. Gonna get back to the boat. It's not fun by any means, but I come back and I'll hand sand all the little nooks and crannies. I'll use a scrap piece of wood, fold it around it, and I'll use this as a sanding block to block this out and just kind of fine tune everything. Go dogs. Now that I got everything sanded, super smooth, she's ready for paint. But before I paint, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the hatches and work on that because I'm going to have to test fit them and stuff. And I don't want to scratch up all brand new paint. So we're going to go ahead and get the hatches cut now. And then we'll paint once the hatches are all mocked up.